This video is about Christianity in the Global South. It is based on an essay I wrote for a university course in 2020. That essay in turn is based on Philip Jenkins's book, The New Phases of Christianity, Believing in the Bible in the Global South. It's from 2006. Despite its age, the main point of the book still seems relevant today. In the past, Christianity has been disseminated from Europe and North America to everywhere else. The Global South here refers to that everywhere else. What is interesting is that whereas Christian theology has been formed in the Global North and then taught to the people of the Global South by missionaries, these may now be changing. The Global South is becoming more important to Christianity than the North, and so South may also become more significant in forming Christian theology, putting pressure for change in the North as well. There are some reasons for this change. Most importantly, population growth is stopping and turning negative in the North, or at least in Europe. At the same time, population growth is very fast in Africa, and it's also fast in Asia, where already most of the human population lives. Christianity is also spreading rapidly in both of those continents. Meanwhile, Europe has already become very secular and is becoming even less religious at present, and the US seems to be following Europe in secularization, as more and more young and urban people are discarding religion finally even there. The majority of Christians will soon be in the Global South. In the past, there has been a kind of an assumption that theology proper is what the theologians of the North do, while theology from other places has always been labeled according to its origins, for example, African theology. It's noteworthy that the Catholic Church appointed the first black African cardinal as late as in 1960. The churches and theologians of the North have been following in their teaching the rest of northern societies as the societies have become more liberal and scientific. The churches of Africa and Asia have been more conservative, even fundamentalist. This is clear, for example, in their attitudes toward homosexuality. These theological interpretations of the Global South may begin to guide the interpretations of the North in the future. That is not a pleasant thought. I will now explain why Christianity is so popular in the Global South and some of the ways in which it differs from mainstream Christianity in the North, especially North Europe. I want to emphasize that I am not talking about everyone in the Global South. These are all generalizations about what is more common in those areas, and therefore what explains the popularity of Christianity there as well as opposed to Europe. In the North, Christianity is so ubiquitous that it is sometimes difficult for Northerners to even notice it. This also influences how we are likely to interpret the stories of the Bible. Because the stories are so familiar to us, we fail to be surprised by the twists in them. We may gloss over aspects of the stories related to poverty, famine, plague, war, and other things that make life very uncertain, because those things are not and have not for several decades now been part of our experience. They seem alien to us, yet they were central and certainly well known to the people who wrote the stories of the Bible. They are also familiar to many in the Global South, making the stories more relatable to them than to us Northerners. The worldview of the people of the Global North is very much influenced by science. Christians in the North are likely to skip the parts of the Bible that talk about demons, healings, or other miracles, and other things that involve the magical worldview of the authors. The Northerners focus on morality and tend to see religions in general as being about morality only. People usually project their own values into what they read in the Bible. Educated Northerners, especially Europeans, usually have liberal values, at least compared to the authors of the Bible. This is for a big part because of the violent history of religion in Europe, as well as awareness of other religions of the world and also of other cultures and ways of thinking in general. Much of the so-called wisdom literature of the Bible is just clichés in the North. Some of the proverbs can even be considered harmful, for example, when they advocate using violence in the upbringing of children. In traditional oral cultures, which may still be important aspects of some cultures of the Global South, proverbs make sense as a way of conveying culture and beliefs to the next generation. This kind of literature is more valued in the South than in the North. In the Global South, life is precarious for many people. Access to scientific medicine can be difficult or impossible. Traditional beliefs about witchcraft, spirit, and magic are common. Floods, drought, famine, and war may be also commonplace, not just something you read about in the history books. There may be no organized society, or it may be weak, war-torn, and full of corruption. In these circumstances, people will look for any possible help. The stories of the Bible fit their worldview more easily than scientific knowledge, which they might have little access to anyway. African interpretations of Christianity have emphasized the significance of communities because of the fragility of the larger society. Communities and clans have unfortunately also waged wars on each other. The stories of the Bible may help overcome ethnic boundaries and build peace. The average Christian, globally speaking, is poor. The poor especially find the stories of the New Testament relatable. Those stories have also empowered some marginal groups in the South. The Dalits of India, for example, have appealed to the Bible when arguing for equality. Women have had difficulty getting heard in many traditional communities. In Christian communities, they have been able to appeal to the authority of the Bible when giving their own interpretations of the stories of the Bible. Literacy and knowledge of the Bible have thus enabled them to challenge the authority of the men and the local views about gender roles, marriage, and such things. They have also been able to use the Bible study groups to talk about taboos such as HIV, rape, and so on. Even the illiterate have been able to learn about the Bible through radio, television, and movies. Some features of the old Hebrew religion are considered embarrassing in the North, and there have been efforts to rid Christianity of them. In Africa, these can be seen as connections to the reader's own culture, increasing the value of the stories. Some independent churches have even claimed to descend from the lost tribes of Israel. In the Global South, Christians are still living in the midst of flourishing pagan and other religions, unlike Christians in the North. Thus, the Southerners can more easily relate to the stories of the Old Testament, the authors of which lived in similar circumstances. Also, stories of God descending on a mountain or something can make sense from the perspective of a traditional pagan who may convert to Christianity. In the North, such stories are more likely to alienate potential converts. Martyrdom is also something people in the South may be familiar with. Dictators have persecuted Christians in some countries. In some cases, religious groups have been violently hostile to Christians. Many Christians have fled to become refugees. Even in some democracies, some Christian leaders have been assassinated because they have demanded social justice. Awareness of such things in one's own society can make Christian martyrs more relatable. Many people in the global south have many reasons to convert to Christianity, or at least to think it makes sense. In the global north, especially among the well-educated living in secular states, it is very different. The magical worldview of the Bible and Christianity, with the naive stories about the battle between the forces of good and evil, is difficult to take seriously. Some places in Africa, for example, remind us of the times of the witch hunts in Europe, which is not good. Superstitious beliefs about the magical properties of the body parts of some wild animals or human albinos are still causing much evil in the world, as difficult it is for us to understand. It does, however, explain why Christianity is so popular in those parts of the world. Theologians in the North have participated in dialogue with other religions and adopted views that are so liberal and open to other religions that the theologians of the South can justifiably accuse them of discarding claims to the truth of Christianity. In the global South, the truth of Christianity and the falsity of other religions is taken more seriously. Fundamentalism is common in the South, including conservative, often literal interpretation of the Bible. This is not just the South copying what certain American preachers have been saying, although they have no doubt had much influence as well. For example, in Korea, a traditional literalist form of Confucianism has also influenced Korean Christianity in the same direction. In Africa, surrounding Muslim communities have influenced Christians in the veneration of the Quran, so that the Christians have also wanted to emphasize the value of their holy book, perhaps motivating also its literal interpretation. Learned theologians and especially experts of exegetics in the North do not much value such views regarding talk of the Bible as the Word of God as naive. Christian theologians in the South hold the Old Testament in much higher regard than their colleagues in the North. The latter are used to the almost Marcionistic way of belittling the Old Testament, focusing much more on the New Testament. In the South, rules about eating and taboos in the Old Testament are similar to those of their own traditional cultures. This makes them reluctant to discard those rules from their version of Christianity. Similarly, the idea of collective punishment of the whole community for the sins of one member, which is abhorrent in the modern North, is much more acceptable to the South. It is difficult for many in the North to understand the appeal of the theology of success, but in the South it is very popular. The idea of that theology is that God will reward those who give, meaning give all your money to the preacher and somehow you will get it back many times over. This is clearly a cruel con, taking advantage of people at their weakest. The main reason for the popularity of this theology is desperation. There just is much more poverty and desperation in the South than in the North. The magical worldview is also more prevalent in the South, so the idea of making offerings to spirits in return for something doesn't seem as strange as it might to most people in the modern North. Christianity has been very much tamed in the North, especially Northern Europe. It is beginning to disappear altogether, as people are finally becoming secularized. The US has been slower at this than Europe, but it is catching up, especially as the more religious generations pass on to make way for less religious generations. There is also backlash, as the religious try to fight for the survival of their religion. This is what fundamentalism in the North is probably mostly about. Southern theology can take a leading role in Christianity, and the fundamentalists in the North can adopt the most anti-scientific and superstitious beliefs of the South in the process. The worst problem is that people in the North are beginning to see how bad the future really looks, and this might lead many of them to adopt fundamentalist religious views that offer hope. False hope, but hope nonetheless. This could lead to a terrible regression from the mere cultural Christianity to widespread fundamentalism, witchcraft theologies, and many other awful things in the name of religion. This could prevent us from overcoming the existential challenges we are facing as a species, such as the climate crisis. But if we could face those challenges and overcome them, and actually have hope for a better future, it might be possible to also offer hope for the global South. Then perhaps the theology of the South could be tamed as well, and in time even replaced by secularism.